Welcome, beloved hearts. This is Anne Rees and Melchizedek, and I'd like to welcome you to this Virgo full moon in the heart of compassion and love. And this is really just going to be a little bit of a talk, initially at least, on what has been going on a planetary level and how the energy of the moon is affecting us, how the energy of the sun is affecting us, and of course, what is happening as we move deeper into not only new earth and soul embodiment, but moving into this powerful gateway that we are experiencing at this time, heading right into the equinox energy on March the 20th. So this week in particular, energetically, we've been experiencing a lot of solar flares, and the solar flares really knock us out. And what we experience, of course, with the solar flares and the sun ray frequencies is very much just increased light frequency and plasma light coming through into the body and purging, clearing, and releasing as we fine-tune those frequencies from within. And of course, what we're experiencing too is very much a reflection of not only the inner reality that's rebalancing, and the Virgo full moon is very much about divine discernment, rebalance, and also very much about that ability to deepen into the compassion and love within. And now, so at this moment in time, more than any other moment in time, as we shift into collective Christ consciousness, we ask to hold that field of light of the heart of the compassion and the heart of love. So what will be coming up for all of us is to hold that field of compassion and non-judgment and without blame, is we've got to be looking at expanding that heart. And so primarily we do this when we're working with the 3D, 4D issues and distortions and traumas within ourselves. We experience that through grief. So many of us may have experienced in this last week a deepening sense of the grief activating, of feeling it in the lungs, feeling it in the heart. And as the heart is expanding, we're holding that flame of compassion for ourselves. That's very much our divine feminine energy coming through. And essentially with that, we also then able to take that flame of compassion and hold it on that world stage, because we're seeing then the dismantling of old earth templates, and a lot of it is related to not only that shift in consciousness that we're experiencing, but also what's happening in the universe, what's happening in our own universe that connects us as the light of God we are to the realms of illumined truth, to the spiritual hierarchy, and of course deepening into our own ascended states of beingness, and being able to expand our consciousness and hold ourselves as that consciousness expands for longer periods of time, so that the light body DNA can start to program from within. So what we've been experiencing then with the solar flares activating is possibly a lot of anxiety, time that we need to rest, and if we have busyness of our own days, maybe we're not able to take that time that we should do. So our emotions start to feel more uncomfortable because we're not able to completely sit with them. Or when it comes up, we want to avoid it. We move back into our own addictions, or we move back into our own perceived victim persecutor consciousness of those old stories that are being heard at this time. So I can see that my internet seems to be going on and off a little bit. So I'll just see how it goes. I might actually just change networks in a minute. We can just have a look and see how everything is doing here. Alright, so what I would like to do is take us through a deeper understanding of how we're expressing the energy of the Divine Mother, because in order to fully align into the higher dimensional fields of light, we do that not only with our consciousness, but the physical body itself starts to release a lot of those old patterns and false beliefs and judgments as the photonic light activates into each cell, and the carbon-based frequencies move into the crystalline light plasma frequencies. And in order to do that, we have to really be able to completely be in that fifth dimensional frequency of 0 point, in that field of love. And the way that we experience that field of love is that we actually connect to and through the unity grid of divine love into Gaia. Gaia is initially for us the energy of the Divine Mother, and from there we expanded into the frequency and energy of connecting to our own hearts, to our own brothers and sisters of the light that are working with us. And we work together and within the quantum field for particular service roles too. And part of that frequency and energy then that we experience through the plasma light rays is very much connected to the energy of the rays. And these are essentially plasma light frequencies. And I know I have mentioned this before, if we talk about the plasma light frequencies that spiral through the great central sun, through the central sun, through our sun, and then of course they mask all the planets, and then of course the sacred earth. And it moves into and through Shambhala and also Venus, and then many of the ascending planets, and then connects into our own loving hearts. But these flames of light are held on the inner planes or higher dimensions through many of the illumined beings that we would know as the Sisterhood of the Rose and the Brotherhood of the Light. And these illumined beings then hold the frequency and energy of the plasma light rays with these particular qualities, and they imbue or work with initiates of light. And together then you hold particular qualities of these different rays. And there's different systems and energies and understandings too of the qualities of the rays. I know that some of you may be familiar with the teachings of Elizabeth and Mark Prophet, and others may be familiar with the teachings of the late Joshua David Stone, and yet others too may be familiar with the teachings of Madame Blavatsky, Alice Bailey. And each of those beautiful beings, in their own way, walk through an understanding of the rays and initiations and secret doctrines. But now where we are is that we're sending together. It's no longer something that's just intellectually experienced, but it's something that's experientially experientially experienced. And we offered the opportunity here to have a sense of not only how the threefold flame ignites and activates from within, but also how we take that out through and into the unity grid and the qualities that we are still integrating or possibly dismantling and fine-tuning as we transcend from one frequency or one level of consciousness into the next. And that is essentially different levels of inner plane light work or service work. The system of energy that I work with seven earthly rays and the 5 higher earthly rays and 6 cosmic rays. And so what I wanted to do with us today was take us into a deeper understanding of those first 7 rays and how they are affecting us at this time, and how we deepen into holding that flame of compassion and love, also called the threefold flame of power, love, and wisdom. So many of us are familiar with the threefold flame, and the threefold flame also comes through the 7th ray department, and the 7th ray department is the ray of ceremonial magic. So the ray of ceremonial magic then is very much one that connects us ever deeper into the field of transformation and change. And many know this as the violet flame of the patterns of perfection. Others know this as the flame of Saint Germain. And of course, all of us know this as a flame that we hold within our own loving hearts and expands to, around, and through the sacred earth to lift all life into the new earth templates or the new frequencies that are activating and have been for a very long time. So the violet flame is certainly one that we work with, and that all rays, because that 7th ray ashra is part of that golden age of light, that's part of the frequency of energy that we all work with and connect with as we deepen into new earth, into that kindness, care, loving, respect, honoring of one another, coming together in community and love. So let's move a little bit into that and then see how it's connecting into what is going on the world stage at this time. And I'm going to move through each one of the 7 rays, and then in another transmission I will move into a deeper understanding of the 5 higher earthly rays, and following that the 6 cosmic rays. So let me also see if I can't possibly change my network, and if it does get very bad, then I will just come back to this. I think it's just a windy day here, and it sometimes interferes with the network. I do apologize for the interruption, and I hope this connection is going to be a little bit better. Otherwise, I may have to pause and just see what we can do there. All right. Definitely struggling a little bit today. It looks like that is also not a very good connection. I'm going to just pause the session and see what I can do. really do apologize for this interruption. So let's move into a little bit of an understanding of those ray frequencies. So we're going to talk initially about that first ray, and that first ray energy is very much an energy of will and power, and that energy of will and power then is very much connected to not only owning our own power in terms of deepening into aligning our will with the divine will of Mother, Father, God, but it's also related to deepening into releasing the victim and persecutor consciousness. And when we're working then with this first ray, we see it very much at the moment reflected on that outer world stage. And it also then brings up within us a lot of our own anger. And the archetypal energies related to this first ray, it's a beautiful blue flame. It's the adept, it's the judge, and it's also related to the warrior. So we have then a sense of that energy and frequency that's connecting with us. And how it's been played out on the world stage, you get a very good sense of that through just having a sense of what's going on. Unfortunately, with the conflict in Europe, which is opening and expanding the heart through the flame of compassion to hold that, and also allow them for that beautiful threefold flame to expand from within and around us, where we're working with our own anger, our own judgment, our own lesser than and better than consciousness, and also then just deepening into 0 point, into holding that beautiful flame of compassion, which is primarily the pink flame, but then it's got a lot of that beautiful blue light ray frequency, and then it's got a lot of the golden yellow, which is a third ray of divine intelligence. So essentially then what we're working with is that we are within us dismantling old levels of trauma and old ways of reacting. That is what happens when we start to experience that anger, which is also the wounded masculine. So the wounded masculine then we start to embrace, and the only way that we can embrace the wounded masculine is very much through the heart of love, where we're not judging ourselves. And then we take that same beautiful flame of compassion and we ignite it into the sacred, around the sacred earth and through the unity grid, into what is happening upon the sacred earth. And with that then we're able to shift that old consciousness. And so this more than ever is just the time that we are able to do this, because everything has been dismantled. You know, kind of what's going on with the conflict, with the wars, and it's not just obviously between Russia and Ukraine, but in lots of other countries. We're bringing our awareness to places that are in war, places that are in poverty, places that there is where there is a lot going on that is all about misuse and abuse of power. So as we hold that, we go in and we just love. We love ourselves, and we allow then for that anger to be dissolved through our loving hearts, initially sitting with it. And then we get to the point where we can actually just fine-tune through deeper levels of loving, deeper levels of kindness, deeper levels of respect, deeper levels of honoring. And that just starts to release even more those old templates and those old frequencies. And I think we're probably all quite aware. We've done a lot of our own work in different times with these frequencies and energies. And that second ray then is this beautiful golden yellow flame of wisdom. And so what happens then is that we play out through the first ray a lot of that abuse and misuse and power, victim persecutor consciousness, and we also then start to release it through this beautiful blue flame, and then we deepen into the higher mind. But the higher mind expression really only comes online after the pineal gland activates, and we start to experience that divine discernment, that divine neutrality, that sense of not taking sides, not judging, because that third ray is very much about the lesser than and better than consciousness, arrogance, imagining that we're better than another, imagining that some are less than us, and imagining that people of different colors aren't the same as us. So everything is about dissolving all of that perceived separation between ourselves and between others. And it's also nice and activates that deepening sense of wisdom, but that deepening sense of wisdom comes really in that expression of connecting multidimensionally when we start to merge, because part of the experience that we have as we ascend in each moment, as we expand our consciousness in each moment, is the ability to access our ancient memories. So that then is experienced through the pineal gland initially, because of course we also experience the activation of the pituitary, the hypothalamus, and the thalamus glands. And with that too, we experience new neural pathways being created, and almost like an expansion of the left and right brain into new levels of integration. So the intuition is increasing, the what we call our gifts, which is actually more about just natural abilities, those start to come online simultaneously. And also we start to experience what we perceive or call the ancient memories, those memories of multidimensional timelines, where we have experienced ourselves as initiates, where we have experienced ourselves as a priest or priestesses, the initiates in any kind of different multidimensional timeline periods, whether it's a healer, whether it's a teacher. All of that then is really igniting greater levels of wisdom and knowing and discernment. It's actually a discernment of truth. There's so many different perspectives, and each perspective offers another level of truth. I don't know if there's ever any one truth. It's just from one moment to the next, when our consciousness expands, we receive different perceptions or understandings that we didn't have that moment before. So that's why new earth is so fluid and organic, because what we imagine or believe today will often change tomorrow. So it's a very interesting one where we initially experience the pineal gland activating and the insights coming through the third eye. And those insights themselves then, it's just glimpses, because we're given just building blocks, we're given pieces of that puzzle. So I know that the human aspect of ourselves, the more linear aspects of ourselves, are really keen to see the bigger picture. But we can't actually see that. We have to move into holding our consciousness to a particular level of integrating and activating those particular light codes from within and programs from within, that once we then get that, we then see the next level, and we then see the next level. And then we move into this beautiful third ray, some people call it the second ray, of love and wisdom. And that's just a beautiful pink flame that expands from the loving heart. And that frequency and energy, of course, is just all about love, but it's all about compassion, because we need that compassion in expanding the loving heart. Initially to release the judgment of self, and then of course to be releasing the judgment of others. So what we do then is that we start to integrate and merge more deeply with the divine feminine aspects of ourselves, while healing the divine, while healing the wounded masculine, in order to access the divine masculine or the divine father. And so this Virgo full moon energy, of course, it's juxtaposed by the flow of the water through the Pisces astrological alignments, or through the sun Piscean energy. But essentially what it is, it's shifting in consciousness and alignment, moving from unconsciousness, moving into consciousness with higher levels of truth revealing. So that is a theme that's coming through. Divine discernment is higher levels of consciousness with greater truth revealing. And that is essentially what we're experiencing at this time. We're experiencing a deepening sense of knowing, wisdom. And that higher mind wisdom aspect then ignites into the loving heart, where the mind, the higher mind itself, flows from that wisdom, you could say, flows from the loving heart. So the heart then becomes the higher mind energy and frequency in the movement forward. And that movement forward initially is quite slow because we keep integrating and plateauing. So we expand the consciousness, but then there's still stuff that we're working with, our traumas and false beliefs and judgments. And so we have to then move back into that frequency where hopefully as we expand the flame of divine love in as the soul light that we are, we can hold it more. We can just love it. We can just, if the tears need to flow, we let the tears flow. If we need to get angry for a little bit of time, or what are our tools when we're feeling that, we allow ourselves to feel that too. And then we move deeper into the expansion of the heart, where we then have that threefold flame coming together of power, love, and wisdom. A threefold flame, as I expressed previously, is photonic, is infused with the photonic light. It's a plasma light frequency that starts to imbue into the photonic light or soul light within the body. And as it does that, it also expands as a fire around the body and energy field. And that fire then is like a fire that burns all the energetic fire, that burns all the dross, all the old beliefs, all the old judgments, all the old timelines, completely dissolves them, that they no longer need to be experienced. But it has to come from within, and it's experienced through and within what we call the inner golden sun, which is really essentially the integration of the divine mother, the divine father, and then the innocence and purity within we call it the Christ child. But it's just because our innocence, when we experience that initially, that purity that we start to experience, it still needs to grow up in a way. It's like just it doesn't have the skills yet to, except for just being loved, to really take the work out there. So what we do is that we then use the fine mind, we use the skills and gifts that we've got of intuition, of knowing, of deeper level of remembrance, of timelines of being omniscience. And this is really also about being the high priest and priestess. It's the 222 codes are very much connected into that energy of being the high priest and priestess. And also, the codes igniting the same moment in time of the 222 codes in the sacred year of 2022 are actually the 1111 codes. And I don't know if you've been seeing those numbers coming up possibly, because those 1111 codes are the codes of divinity, but they're the codes of divine love. And we may be noticing this simultaneously. We're noticing sort of different numbers or frequencies or qualities or sonic frequencies, vibrations through the inner ears. It's all directly connected into the frequency of the loving heart that activates those curves from within numerologically, as well as through the sacred geometry, because everything in the higher dimensions is sacred geometry. And then, sound, sacred geometry, color, quality, frequency. And what that does then is we're able to hold the threefold flame. Then we are living fifth dimensionally. And as we're holding it, what happens is we deepen into the quantum field. We deepen into that connection that some call Shambhala, that some have experienced in different timelines as initiates. In different timelines where we possibly in our own parallel realities, we traveled through and into Tibet, so we traveled into other areas in the Himalayas or wherever it may have been in order to seek the wisdom from the masters. So that wisdom from the masters, that level of akasha, is now experienced within us because we make that connection through the quantum field. And it's a different experience of just calling upon the sisterhood of the rose and the brotherhood of the light, which is absolutely beautiful and wonderful, and I absolutely love to do that too. But it's recognizing we are actually the sisterhood and we are actually the brotherhood. And when we experience a deepening sense of being the Divine Mother, which is the frequency coming through for many of us at this time, through the heart of compassion, to hold that compassion and love for the sacred earth, and primarily through the conflict in Europe and other countries right now, we become the energy of the Divine Mother. We're merging with the brotherhood of the light, the sisterhood of the rose, to embody those frequencies of remembrance of of the spiritual hierarchy on the inner planes. Although what's also interesting is many of those masters on the inner planes, although they're working there energetically, they actually have also embodied in human form. And they are possibly even some beautiful souls that we actually personally might know. So it's quite interesting because we're running so many different parallel realities simultaneously. But what we do feel and experience is as that flame starts to activate more from within the loving heart, then it starts to connect to and be imbued with other ray frequencies, energies, and ashrams. We could even still call it that, ashrams, because there are energetic crystalline cities and ashrams on the inner plane that initially we travel to deepen our own level of remembrance through our commitment, through our devotion, through being disciples, we could call it that. And that allows then a remembrance of actually lifetimes of not only having ascended, but also lifetimes where we ourselves were of service or are still of service. And we're just coming into deeper levels of remembrance of that because we're still clearing some of those lower timelines of the lesser than and better than consciousness. And of course, clearing a lot of the trauma because many of us as light workers leading the way have gone through some very challenging experiences. And so when then the solar flares come up like we've experienced this last week, it can make us feel very anxious. We can get heart palpitations, we can get headaches, we can feel really, really tired, we could have anger coming up, we could have grief coming up, we could have a sense of I just can't do this anymore, I've just had enough, or we can go unconscious because it feels like it's been a lifetime or 2 or 3 or actually quite a few, isn't it, where we feel like we've just been doing so much of the same work. But this time is different. This time is really essentially where we are completely ascending because the words are in place, where in other lifetimes they actually haven't been. We had to ascend individually, and now we have the opportunity to ascend collectively, which is just pretty amazing. That's what essentially this year is all about. So I'm just tying it into a little bit about what's going on with this Virgo full moon energy, because the full moon itself, as we are aware or may be aware, is the time when we bring to fruition new levels of manifestation. The new moon is always about setting that intention of what we possibly would like to create, shift, change, transcend, fine-tune. And the full moon is really almost like that next level of manifestation, and we truly are moving into a next level of new beginning. That's what's really coming through, because the equinox is actually also the start of the astrological new year. So we can think of it too as March the 20th, because we're moving into the sign of Aries as a new beginning. If there's any of that old trust, of that old energy that we want to just completely release now, that we just have to look at our habits, we have to look at our energy, we have to look at our frequency, how we can elevate not only our consciousness and raise our vibration, but what we're doing that takes us unconscious, that doesn't really create that harmonious, loving frequency and energy from within. And, just even breathing. Breathing is one of those first tools of consciousness where we can just attune to how we're feeling and what we're experiencing at this time. So then we move into the next level of rays that activates, and how these rays, light rays, activate from within too, is very much related to this, almost like a golden sun. So it's like the purity and innocence is we merging with the divine feminine, we're getting a sense of the divine masculine. But the divine masculine doesn't embody while we're still experiencing our own distortions of judgment and blame, because the divine masculine, it's a father energy, and so it's the mother energy that we merge and integrate, consume, become, and then we merge and connect into the divine father energy. So until we can do both, merge and integrate with the divine feminine which is the heart of love, and that's at first level of fifth dimensional consciousness, where the photonic light slows us down, and everything becomes slow, and everything becomes almost like we're dreaming into reality, because this is essentially what we're doing. The next level of our service work, the next level of our expansion of light collectively upon the sacred earth. Essentially, we're just programming and activating initially from within, and then in our hearts, and then through our connection on the inner planes of quantum field to many of those beautiful beings. And as we integrate and we're merging, we're going to have, when we talk about the divine feminine, those lifetimes that we've been female will come through first. Those lifetimes we have experienced ourselves in states of ascended consciousness. Those are the aspects that will come through, but also the many lifetimes that we've experienced that we're still clearing those karmic realms, if we want to call it that. And it's not just connected just to this planet and this earth, it's like connected on so many different levels as well, to different star systems, to different planets, and we have to clear the karma for that as well. Everything is about clearing the karma. And so right now, we're in a place where we are assisting in clearing part of the world karma, and clearing, kind of what's going on this earth plane, and not only in holding the light, but in actually just opening our hearts in understanding without judgment, without taking sides. That again is that flame of compassion and love in divine neutrality and in divine discernment, as the wisdom of the higher mind connects into the loving heart as one heart and one love and one unified field of light. And as we then connect into the sacred geometries and numerologies within and without, and without is very much connected into the unity grid, into the heart of Gaia, we then start to find that connection into the brotherhood and sisterhood, and then also, interestingly enough, as we go down into the earth, into the inner earth sun, we start to connect into all the light beings, such as the light beings within Telos. So there's a whole light community as well that live within the inner earth, and we are making that connection there too. And many of them also follow the teachings of the masters. So then we move into the next level of ray frequencies. So I was talking very much about the seventh ray, and the seventh ray then activates around the sacred earth as this violet flame, but it also ignites around us. It does the transmutation, the transformation of all that is being experienced. And from there, then what we do is that we also find ourselves in these different ray ashrams. And the fourth ray ashram is the fourth ray of harmony through conflict, and that is just very much connected into, it's this beautiful emerald green flame, and it's really a deepening sense of our own creativity. Like essentially, to get to that, it's like we've got to leave the left brain consciousness that is of the lower timelines, that says we need to work in a particular way. We need to experience X amount of hours working in order to be financially secure. So we deepen into what is our joy, what is our passion, how can we experience that in different levels of our own life, and how can we deepen into trust and surrender, because the whole process within New Earth is one of trust and surrender. And we truly need to be able to deepen into that essence of trust within ourselves, to be able to hear and feel and sense the soul light from within. So this is essentially then about how do we allow ourselves to completely trust, particularly if we've experienced a lot of our own traumas. We don't even trust ourselves. And our unconscious aspects, they're very indecisive. And then we jump between expanding the consciousness and understanding that, this is what we actually are here to do, to be love. We understand it intellectually, and we're still working with expanding the heart. But because the cellular memories are still there and the trauma of that is still quite strong, what we do is we move back into survival. So it's really an interesting place to be because we are moving then, oscillating between the higher dimensional fields of consciousness and then back into what we still need to embrace without judgment and without blame. And then we do that as part of working in these different wave frequencies. We all work with these wave frequencies, these plasma light rays that ignite from within. It's perceived sort of within that golden sun that ignites within the loving heart, within the heart and thalamus chakras. And it's like these light rays surrounded with, which we also receive through the sun and through the moon. That's why the full moon energy has also got a lot of the plasma light ray frequencies that come through. And the sun, of course, it's also the plasma light, but it's the solar flares as well that affect us energetically in our electromagnetic fields. So we're experiencing then all of this simultaneously, and then there are, if we close our eyes and go within, sometimes there are particular colors that we feel and experience from within. And so this is a beautiful sort of green color. Sometimes it might be lighter hues of green, sometimes darker hues of green. Sometimes these ray frequencies are also imbued with other colors. It could be like diamonds, it could be golden frequencies. I know when I think of that blue flame, sometimes it's like light blue, sometimes it's dark blue. When I think of the pink, it's often merged into a golden frequency and energy, but of course it's also the, bringing through the masculine frequency and energy. So there's a lot of different colors and tones and hues that come through with these frequencies. And then when we move deeper into changing the way that we work, changing the way that we experience life, or how we imagined we needed to from the way that society dictated in a way, or the way that we were brought up, being how our parents were, and our grandparents, and people at large, that we are meant to just get up and, work like really, really hard. Even if we don't feel like it, even if we're not well, just keep going, because that's how we are supposed to make money. And that is something that we are dismantling, and we're dismantling not only for ourselves, but for the sacred earth. Because essentially, when we can trust and surrender into the recognition that we each have our own individual puzzle piece within the collective, that there is a divine plan and that we are part of it, and when we can listen to that beautiful soul voice from within, we will find that joy and that passion, and the money will always flow. Because from New Earth, finances are quite different too. And that takes us into the start of the next ray, which is the concrete knowledge. And that's a beautiful orange flame. And that is really a rebalancing of divine equilibrium. It's also quite a scientific ray. So we start to see the quantum field connections, spiritual science, a lot of people with very fine minds also from the energy of that ray. But that ray too is starting to find a new balance between the physical and spiritual, the emotional and mental, from a higher perspective. From a lower perspective, then, we are still dismantling that perception of science and spirituality connecting, because of course it's all one. And to understand the quantum field, in fact, we do need to have a really basic understanding of some of the quantum physics and templates. It would just be quite useful for all of us. So just consider that. But essentially, when we're working initially within those pods as initiates of light, with the energy and frequency of that fifth ray, what they mean is that everything is being upside down. And we've got to find and bring together that new level of balance within our own lives. So it's mostly spending more time out in nature if we haven't been doing that. So wow! So that's sitting behind our computers, shutting the outdoors. We need to spend more time in nature, on the beaches, in the mountains, and it's not something we talk about as like do it. It's something that you actually have to do if you want to connect deeper to yourself, because your body actually needs not only the energetic frequencies, but it takes us into the pulse and rhythm of the collective consciousness of light, that we also call the I am avatar consciousness of light. So that I am avatar consciousness of light is the collective higher light of all awakening and awakened souls upon the sacred earth. And we are all part of that. So all of us are coming together, but we're experiencing our own individual puzzle pieces within the collective, but we also have a collective frequency that we hold, such as we've been talking about right now, holding that flame of compassion and love that's igniting around the sacred earth at this time. And of course, it's going within to release our own grief, to release our own judgment, to release our own blame as we embody the divine feminine, connect to the divine Father. And then the birthing, that flame of, that looks like an inner sun, it looks like if you're looking through the sun, through the trees, or even in your photos, you'll see a lot of those light rays. So those light rays are activating from in plasma light frequencies, and those plasma light frequencies then are taking us into the qualities, into the tones, into the sonic frequencies, into the sacred geometries, into the numerologies of each plasma light ray, of each portal activation that is experienced, whether right now it's the different moon frequencies, full moon, new moon, or the astrology, although I must say astrologically we are a little bit less aligned to what is perhaps seen as a more traditional response to particular themes within astrology, because we, from a quantum perspective, it's like just embraced in a new way. And what is often experienced doesn't really apply to awakened souls. But there are always themes, because of course we tune into not only the quantum fields and the higher consciousness realms, but we also tune into what is being shared on this planetary level. And there are obviously themes that come through. And if you tune in your own meditations, I'm sure that you've experienced that too. What you are experiencing from within and clearing from within, you can be very sure that there's a frequency and energy that is being experienced around this earth in particular countries and in particular places where people are working with those particular themes, qualities, dismantling of particular traumas or whatever it may be. And of course, this is just how it goes. In fact, every country has its own prominent ray frequency, and of course, collective net. We talk about that as etheric net of unconsciousness too, that plays out over and over particular old patterns and beliefs, that we just dismantle that through our own frequency and energy as the light of God that we are. But often we will move into that and experience that. And talking of that, then also what comes to mind, just to briefly mention, I don't want to talk too much because I want to move into a bit of a transmission for us too. And I wanted to move through the first 7 rays, some of the understanding of that. And then I'll take us into a transmission, and then I will also offer us the opportunity to connect a little bit deeper for those that may like to, and do a few readings. So one of the things then also, and I know for me too in my early years in working with, all these beautiful frequencies and energies, is that we caught in, let's talk about the flame of Archangel Michael, that beautiful blue flame, and we can use it to the shields of light and the sword of truth, and such beautiful imagery. But when which we need, because when we're making that connection initially, we're making it to the living beings that are outside of us. Even our soul is outside of us initially, fifth dimensional and beyond, because we still put the packed in density. Density is just the carbon-based frequency of the trauma, past beliefs and judgments that we're releasing. And until we release that to quite some degree, at least of commitment, and sitting with it, and just loving it, and accepting it, and then of course seeing the blessings and gifts in all of it, and then simply being able to transcend it as it's no longer needed, by dissolving and collapsing those old timelines. We work with, for many of us, the illumined beings, in a different way where we can feel those frequencies, and we still do that in New Earth, but just differently. The primary difference is that we are integrating more the realization that we ourselves are the archangels, we ourselves are the galactic beings, we ourselves are the brotherhood and the sisterhood of the rose, and so much more. So that initial stage, because we're still lifting our frequency and vibration, we make that connection to feel the overlighting. And it doesn't really matter still in whatever stage we are, but part of that then, for example, in working with that beautiful blue flame of Archangel Michael, which I really also love, and I can feel his energy coming through for us now, which is really lovely. We bring in our shields of light, and we bring in our flames of light, and very much the same way that we work with the plasma light ray frequencies of the rays, we can work with those beautiful archangelic ray frequencies, energies, colors too. The same with the mighty Elohim, and in fact even the sisterhood. Every sort of tradition you will find spiritual level of work that we do has qualities, has symbols, has colors. So it doesn't really matter what level that we're working with there. There's always so much to just appreciate and marinate within, which is quite an interesting word too. We go through things, talking a lot about healing, forgiveness, protection. And even when we experience that, initially it's beautiful and perfect in that moment. But there comes a time when we realize, for example, if we're just supporting this flame to protect us from energy of others or people that we don't like, or something that's going on, or we're feeling overwhelmed, we're energetically very sensitive or empathetic, what we're doing is we're actually closing the heart. We're creating perceived separation. We're creating still that lesser than and better than consciousness, which is really part of the energy of the lower qualities to the third ray. So what I didn't mention is that every ray frequency has a higher qualities than it has lower qualities. So the energy of that ray, the ray frequencies that we're integrating, we obviously have to go within and dismantle the old earth templates of the lower qualities too. So this ray then, that what I was talking about is this theme that I'm mentioning of the Virgo full moon is also about healing. It's also about forgiveness. And I love that we can do that, if we're still needing to. And I know in the initial writings I put the if you're still needing to. Because from a soul perspective, we choose every lesson that we have. We choose every experience that we have. And it's just from the third and fourth dimensional aspects of ourselves. The third dimension being really the unconscious aspects of ourselves, the sleep, the trauma, the pain, playing that out. Some people call that like the prison matrix. And then the fourth dimension, we're waking up, we're making that connection to our beloved I am presence, where we feel our beloved I am presence, our higher selves, our soul light, and it's all the same. It's source light, it's photonic light, it's just embodied as we move from that carbon-based density into the crystalline consciousness, where even the subatomic particles start to spin in that increased light frequency, and crystals are created, and we move into different light body stages. But I wanted to just not go off in too much of a tangent and come back to how we integrate the rays and the energies is in sovereignty and the recognition of ourselves as the light of God, where we shift the consciousness to knowing that we're holding the field, that we're creating that, and that, for example, our own energy is simply expanding. Part of what is being created too is our Merkaba fields of light. So in the system of energy that I've experienced and worked with for many years, I've worked with a Merkaba field of light of 54 feet in diameter once fully activated. But I've spoken to a few people that I know also, very conscious and aware, and they say that their Merkaba field extends 30, 40 feet. So I don't think there's really something that we can't say something is very specific to a particular size or something, and it becomes actually so unimportant to the experience of it. It's just how we get there. That and then we don't compare on our journeys, but as our energy is expanding, and we are then also shifting dimensionally through initially the sky to let's say, anywhere from 30 to 55 feet in diameter around us. And it has within us a lot of the Platonic solids and the sacred geometries. And we use that masculine feminine polarity to take us into the fifth dimension. But beyond that, then we use atomic consciousness to start to travel faster than the speed of light, where the body itself just shifts from one portal to the next, or one dimension to the next, because that's still a polar balance. And polarity doesn't exist, the same as time doesn't exist. We create from this moment, and we dream our creations into being. That's really in part what people talk about from lucid dreaming, because lucid dreaming is where we, in our dream, we're dreaming and we are, imagining that something is happening, but we have the ability to affect that moment in time. So what we are doing, what people do when they're lucid dreaming and they're affecting their reality at that level of sleep, we are doing fully awake and fully aware, because everything is like a dream state. It's a very fluid, dreamy-like state where you feel like you don't really want to do much. I can't certainly speak for a lot of other people, but I know for me it's like takes a lot of effort, and a lot of it is also going off and doing grid work and gatekeeper work, and things are going on, and the quantum level of a lot of it, and sometimes there's energy and sometimes there isn't, and sometimes the body wants this type of food and sometimes it doesn't want anything, but we have to listen. When we're not listening, we're still working with that sleep trauma. We're still working with things that are coming up for